Do you know what I really fancy doing today? Writing 8 blog posts. Said absolutely no one ever. Why would anyone want to write 8 blog posts in a single day? Let me explain why. I recently read the book The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Japanese cleaning, tidying and organisation expert Marie Kondo. When I talk about organisation, I'm not talking about a Fortune 500 company, but rather personal organisation for your personal life, such as the organisation required to keep your home in nice, tidy order. In the book, Mary gives a host of great tidying tips, such as folding your clothes so that they stand up and getting rid of everything in your house that doesn't quote-unquote spark joy. Being someone from birth that's absolutely useless at tidying, I decided to give the book a read to see if I could gain some of Mary's wisdom to become a tidying guru in my own life. But what interested me the most about Mary's book was the method in which she recommends for how people can go from being a tidying loser, someone such as myself, to a tidying superstar in just a single day. She recommends booking out an entire calendar day and making it a tidying event, a tidying marathon. She says that you need to get all of the things in your house and throw them into the middle of the room. Books, clothes, music, CDs, anything just lying around in your house for whatever reason. She then says to split them into 2 piles. One pile for things that don't spark joy, you're going to get rid of these, donate them to charity or maybe recycle them. The other pile of things you like and you actually want to keep, so these will be reorganised in your home using Mary's brilliant methods that she gives in the book. I'll admit I was a little bit sceptical after having read this section of the book. After all, how is it possible for someone like myself who's never been able to tidy anything for his life to become a tidying expert in a single day? To test it out, I decided to give it a try myself. I booked out an entire calendar day and tried the cleaning, tidying marathon that Mary recommends in her book. I threw all of my items into the middle of the room, split them into the 2 piles like she said, and then reorganised the things that I wanted to keep using her system and method. In total, the process took me about 6 hours to complete, but at the end of it, I was amazed to see that I had a tidy environment that I could sustain for the long term. And what's more, whilst completing this massive tidying marathon, I noticed something strange happen after the 30-minute mark. All of a sudden, I sort of became lost in the tidying, and I wasn't actually thinking about anything else but the tidying. This is what they call the flow state, and it's when you're completely focused on the task that you're working on, which isn't too hard for you, but it's not too easy. It's just on the edge of your abilities. There's actually a hit book written about this, and being in the flow state is something that I'm always trying to get into myself because I know that there are massive productivity and quality benefits to being in the flow state. What really struck me about this experience was the way in which Mary suggests people should tackle their tidying problem. She doesn't say you should learn tips and tricks and then do a little bit every so often. No, what she said is you need to book out an entire day and focus on that one thing for the entire day to make huge progress in that thing, tidying. Making massive progress in something in such a short amount of time isn't a feeling I get very often. For other things in my life that I want to make progress in, such as studying for exams or learning a language, I use a slightly different approach. I do a little bit every so often, maybe 45 minutes to an hour every day, in a more step-by-step, gradual fashion. Whilst this is good for doing a little bit every so often, it never really feels like I'm making massive progress, and sometimes I can get discouraged. So I had a thought, what if I could apply Mary's approach to making huge progress in something in such a short amount of time to other areas of my life? Rather than working on other projects for 45 minutes to an hour at a time, what if I spent an entire day on one sole project? Would I see a massive increase in my productivity and progress made? To test it out, I'm going to try it on one of my personal projects. In 2018, I started the blog Runners First. This is a blog for the running community which gives tips, tricks, suggestions and information about running gained from my personal experience with the sport. Usually I write 1 blog post every week. Whilst this is a manageable workload, I'll have to admit sometimes it's difficult to find the energy and the motivation to sit down at the keys and come up with an article. And sometimes it takes me a long while to get into the flow of things and warmed up so that I'm creating good quality content and the ideas are flowing naturally. Also, when I work on things in this more gradual day-by-day approach, I find that it's really difficult to get into the flow state. This is because by the time I've gotten into the flow state, it's then time to move on to the next task due to time constraints for that particular day. How am I going to test it out? I'm going to try writing the equivalent of 2 months worth of blog posts in a single day. That would be 8 posts. Now you could say, oh, that's easy. He's just going to write 8 posts, each with 100 words each. Personally, I feel that 1,500 words is a good benchmark to be aiming for when writing my posts, because this allows me to go into detail in the topics that I'm discussing, and it also allows me to convey some quality ideas. So for this test, I'm going to make 1,500 words the absolute minimum that I can have for any of the blog posts that I write. For the writing of my posts themselves, I have a bank of blog post ideas with very loose structures that I use as inspiration when I actually sit down in my usual week-to-week writing routine at the moment. What I'm going to do is select 8 of those posts that I like the look of, book out the entire of tomorrow, and make that my writing day where I'm going to focus solely on writing the 8 blog posts. So all that's left is for me to give this a try. I'm going to wake up bright and early tomorrow morning, go for my morning run, get a coffee on the go, and sit down at my desk to give this a try. See you tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day and I've just come back from my run in the lovely snow. Aren't we lucky here in Britain? I've got the coffee on the go and I'm going to start the test of writing 8 blog posts in a day to see if I can be hugely productive and make massive progress in a short amount of time in my blog, Runners First. Let's go. So I sat down and started writing. I didn't know what to expect as the most posts I'd written in any one day before was 2. Was it really doable for me to write 8 in a single day? The first 10 minutes felt really hard and I experienced massive mental resistance. Why was I doing this when I could be doing something much easier like watching Mandalorian, playing Warzone with friends, or mindlessly surfing the web? Then all of a sudden something strange happened. I lost track of the time and I found myself solely focused on the writing. I'd overcome the initial effort of settling into the writing and found myself fully engaged in the process. I was in the flow state. Suddenly, I had 3 posts written. Okay, so I'm 3 hours in and I've just finished blog post number 3. I'm feeling good and each blog post has taken me about 1 hour to complete. At the start, it took a little while for me to get into the swing of things, but now I'm definitely in the flow state. The ideas are coming to me very naturally, and I'm writing content I'm actually quite happy with. So, I'm going to go and get lunch, get a coffee on the go, and restart the writing after a short break. While writing post 4, I noticed an improvement I could make to my writing system. Up to that point, I'd always loosely planned posts with headings and subheadings, but I always struggled to remember what I was thinking when I came back to them while writing. Instead, I experimented bullet pointing the ideas I wanted to convey below each heading, so when I got to them, all the thinking was done and all I had to do was show up and write. This made life so much easier and I found writing these posts more efficient. Working on something so intensely for a long period of time in one go gave me the chance to think about the systems I had in place and where improvements could be made. Small system improvements can lead to huge, rapid progress in the long run. However, when I work on something in shorter chunks, like studying for an exam, my focus is on using the limited amount of time that I have available to do the work itself, rather than thinking about how I'm doing the work. I now realise that this might be inefficient, as although I have the impression of putting hard work in, my progress could be limited if the method I'm following is inefficient. Okay, so I'm 5 hours into this blog post writing test and I've now finished my 5th blog post. On average, they're taking me about 1 hour each. I've just made a massive change to the way in which I write my blog posts and it's already made a huge difference to my productivity. I'm writing the blog posts quicker and it feels like I'm writing much higher quality content. However, I'm starting to notice a drop in my concentration levels. So what I'm going to do is go for a long walk and hopefully when I come back I'll be feeling re-energised and ready to take on the remaining 3 blog posts for the test. See you in a little while. 30 minutes later, my walk complete, I sat back down for posts 6 and 7. Post 6 wasn't a problem, but upon starting post 7, it all went downhill. Okay, I've just finished blog post number 7, and to be honest with you, I'm starting to feel the effects. This is becoming really tough now, and I'm starting to think that I've bit off a lot more than I could chew. The quality of the writing isn't up to my normal standards and it's become really hard to concentrate. So what I'm going to do is try and clear my head with another long walk. I'm going to come back down, sit here at the keys and try and come out with the last blog post out of the 8. And then tomorrow I'm going to share my experience with you and hopefully give you some interesting insights into what I've learned from the experience. Wish me luck for the last blog post. See you tomorrow. After my second walk, in the now early hours of the evening, I came back with a newfound determination to tackle the 8th and final post. I'd come so far. Being a little bit tired wasn't going to stop me now. I sat down, started typing, and then something unexpected happened. I started feeling faint in my desk and my surroundings became blurry. I don't know what happened next, but upon waking the next morning, I knew that I'd fainted. I'd worked so hard and come so close. All for nothing. The test was a failure. Just kidding. I got back from the walk, finished post 8 with a newfound energy, spent an hour and a half editing all the other posts, and then went to bed happy. 8 blog posts in 1 day finished. Boom. Okay, so it's the next day and I'm happy to say that yesterday I succeeded in the test and wrote the 8 blog posts. Happy days. Now I'm going to share a few things about what I learned along the way. Halfway through the writing, I made an observation that working on something in such a massively focused way for an entire day is sort of like a sprint, whereas working on something with a gradual step-by-step approach is sort of like a marathon. So I'm going to be referring to them as the sprint way of working and the marathon way of working from this point onwards. So let's talk about the cold hard numbers. In total, I wrote 15,606 words each post with an average of 1,591 words each. In total, I spent 10 hours and 44 minutes writing, and each post took me on average about 82 minutes. There's some big numbers, but you've got to remember that I spent all day writing posts. The only time that I wasn't writing posts was when I was having something to eat or going for a walk at the end of the day. So what are the benefits I noticed from writing posts using the sprint approach? The first massive benefit is that I obviously made massive progress in my blog. I wrote 2 months worth of posts in a single day. It was a massive sense of achievement at the end, and I'm happy now that I can set up the posts on my blog to publish automatically for the next 2 months. The second massive benefit that I noticed was that I was able to get into the flow state that I talked about earlier on in this video. After about 30 to 40 minutes of starting the writing, I found myself completely lost in the task, and the quality of the writing got much better as I went through the writing process. This flow state remained for the majority of the writing. At the end there was a little bit where I sort of had a lapse in concentration, which I'll talk about in a moment, but for the most part I felt completely absorbed in the task, and the writing that I was producing was up to a decent standard. The third massive benefit was that by working on something in such a focused way all day, I was able to look at the systems that I had in place in more detail to see where little improvements could be made. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, I made a massive change to the way in which I write my blog posts, which made a huge productivity change, and I feel like from this point onwards the quality and the quantity of posts that I can produce in the future will be greatly increased. So that was a massive benefit that I noticed. So being able to look at the systems you have in place and being able to improve them is a big advantage of working in a sprint way. Fourth benefit that I noticed was that I was much more relaxed whilst writing blog posts using the sprint approach, because I had all day to do the writing. Unlike in the marathon approach that I usually employ for writing my blog posts, where I have a time constraint to write the post by due to other things going on in that day, using the sprint method was really good for being relaxed and having the freedom to express myself creatively and write quality content without having to worry about time constraints. Now, all those being said, there were a few drawbacks that I will quickly mention. The first main drawback is that this takes a lot of time. The fact that you've got to spend all day on one task just isn't practical or realistic for some people given their live schedules and commitments. The second main drawback is that by working on something in such a focused way for so long, there is a huge risk that your productivity can drop due to concentration levels diminishing as you go through the later stages of the working day. When I got to blog post number 7, I noticed a huge drop in my productivity and my focus was all over the place. I couldn't even read the words on my screen. So what I did was decide to take a walk, and when I came back from the walk, I noticed that I could focus once more. So I would highly recommend anybody else considering working in this tightly focused sprint way to really think about where they're going to have breaks during the working day so they don't get too tired. So the $1 million question, which way of working is better? Concentrating all your effort into one day using the sprint approach, or spreading out your effort over a longer period of time using the marathon approach? Honestly, I think both are good and both have their place. The skill is knowing when to use which method when it suits you. For the most part of the time, it's more sustainable and realistic to maintain a marathon way of working where you do a little bit every so often. However, when you need to double down on something and put in a lot of effort due to things coming up, for example, it might be an exam coming up in a week's time, that may be the time to think about employing the sprint approach where you really double down and focus on that thing for maybe an entire day or 2 days at a time. Personally, out of the two, I do prefer the sprint method after having given it a go. It was really nice to be able to dedicate one entire day just to one thing and make massive progress in it. It was really positive to have the time available to spot where a big improvement could be made in my writing system, which I'm sure will save me a lot of time in the long run. I also like the fact that I didn't feel pressured by any time constraints and that I could literally just double down and focus on the one thing for that one day. That being said, I recommend anyone watching this video to experiment with the two working styles to see which one works for you. Is a sprint approach more appropriate for you, or is it a marathon approach? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.